done that. And if you want to just step back a little bit so that everybody can see. Okay, what's going on in this picture?
A lot.
Okay, so you're noticing an awful lot of stuff. What did you see that made you say an awful lot?
I don't know, there seem to be a lot of different kind of unconnected themes.
Okay. So it's not only a lot of imagery, but a lot of things that don't, right off the bat, seem to go together.
Right.
What were you going to say?
I said he may like to fish.
Okay. What did you see specifically that made you say he likes?
The fish in his hand and the bobber and his tackle box.
Oh.
Yeah.
Here. Okay, so you're thinking that we can tell something about this individual's interests from some of the items in the picture, and you pointed out that he appears to be holding a fish. You identified this round object as a bobber.
Yeah.
What did you see that made you say bobber?
Why did I say bobber?
Yeah.
Just because I fish and that's what it looks like.
Okay, so you brought some personal knowledge, and this looks very much like bobbers you're familiar with. And then you mentioned tackle.
Uh-huh.
And what did you see that made you know those are pieces of tackle?
The fish hooks and the tackle, and just because I use things that look like that.
Okay, so again, these are items that you're familiar with, and you're pointing out that there are little barbs and hooks coming out of these objects as is typical of tackle. One more.
I think he looks confused.
Okay, what did you see that made you say this individual is baffled in some way?
His face and his eyes.
Okay. So you're looking at his facial expression and his gaze and feeling like he's somehow uncertain.
Yes.
Okay. What more?
Maybe he's choosing between liking fish or art.
Exactly, that's exactly right.
Like Wayne, which one's...
Because
Because it looks like on one side he has like fish, and then on the other side he has art in one hand. And then even like on the little container that's holding all the paints, he has a bobber on it, and then looks like a pack of fish ramen noodles.
I have a theory. I think he's trying to decide whether to go to vet school or stay here.
Okay, so a few things. You're noting that he's holding different items in his hand, and they appear like they might represent two kinds of activities, fishing and art. And what did you say that made you say this object represents art?
Well, just because the color palettes, the paintbrush, and
Okay.
also on that other side.
So you're looking at the way there are these different colors and the brush and the shape of it, and thinking it might be the kind of palette that paint is mixed on. And then you also said something about a bobber.
Yeah, he has like a...
Was
appears
that-
to look like a bobber symbol on the...
Okay, so this object very similar in appearance to the one over here that was identified as a bobber, and you're saying that it's on what appears to be a container for brushes. And you said it appears like he's struggling with some kind of decision. You said to what did you say?
To go to vet school. I was joking. To go to vet school or stay here.
Okay. So you might be struggling with a decision about what to do next, including going to veterinary school. One more.
He doesn't have any pants on.
Point out that
Okay, I want to ask you, what do you see that makes you say that? I could. But you're saying that, noticing that makes you feel a little bit.
It just throws me off a little bit.
All right, yes. One more.
So I see some things in the painting that are, you have the fish in his hand, and then the bobber, and the tackle and the box. And then, so I see this equation, 1 + 1 = 3. And so you're kind of like, how does that fit in? And the first thing that struck me was, Maite noted that he was kind of confused, and so maybe there's some confusion. But also 1 + 1 doesn't usually equal 3. And so maybe it's kind of like a tall tale, like a fish story. Like the fish was this big, and each time it gets a little bit bigger. And things don't always add up because the first time you tell the story, the fish was 12 inches, and then next time it's 18.
Right.
Or it was 10 pounds the first time and 15 the next. So maybe that's one of the things I was trying to figure out there.
Okay, so pulling together a number of things that have been noted about sort of disparate objects here and what appears to be kind of a confused expression on this figure's face, and then you noticed this equation that doesn't seem to be standard addition. And that started you thinking about exaggeration and how numbers get bigger, and fish stories where people exaggerate what they caught. What more?
He's kind of like a middle-aged man, like not, I don't know, maybe he's just midlife crisis. He doesn't know what to do. I don't know.
Okay, can I just ask, what did you see that made you identify his age?
Just you see like gray in his hair, and just kind of his facial character is kind of maybe makes him seem a little bit older in age.
Okay, so noticing some things about his appearance that seem to indicate he might be in his middle years, and thinking about the comments that have been made about confusion, sort of brought to mind the way people talk about midlife crisis and people being uncertain which way to go. I mean, you made a joke about go to vet school or stay here. Sometimes people get into that kind of quandary in midlife. Should I be doing what I'm doing, or should I do something else? What more?
The unnamed object on the left-hand side by the paintbrushes. I don't know. That kind of looks
It's
like
a bobber.
a bobber. Is it a bobber as well? Okay.
Okay. So that's an item that didn't really get discussed before, and some people seem to recognize it as bobbers. What do you see that makes you feel it's bobber?
It looks like one.
So again, prior knowledge.
Yeah.
You've had experience with something like that.
I don't know how the candles fit in the.
Yeah, I don't either. But
I
it
don't know
keeps
if it
reminding me of
lights.
like an Andy Warhol Campbell soup painting.
Okay.
Only like he's an Asian man, so maybe it's a ramen noodle or what Campbell's saying for a reason. I don't know.
Okay. So some of you are noticing what appears to be a sort of ramen package back there, very obviously labeled as Campbell's, and that reference for you some artwork that you know about by Andy Warhol.
Right.
That used Campbell's soup imagery. Right. But somebody else, I can't remember if it was you or you, speculated that the fact that it's ramen noodles and that he appears to be an Asian man or Asian American man, you wondered if there was some connection intended there.
And with the symbols on the container of brushes.
Okay. So you're noticing these? And what did you see that made you say that's connected also?
Oh, you see Asian man, kind of what I would assume to be Asian writing.
Okay.
Obviously, I have no idea.
Okay.
But
So, continuing that thought about Asianness and not really being able to read these symbols yourself, but identifying them as looking like Asian writing that you've seen. Anything else on this one?
I really want to know what it says now on the container.
Okay, so that's really left an open question for you. Yeah, very much. Great. Well, if you're up for it, let's try looking at another picture. That was really good warm up. And so let's look at least one other picture and then maybe talk a little bit about this process. And if it's possible for you. But it also shouldn't be leaned on. Okay, what's going on in this picture?
Can you guys they come closer to you? And over
Come in a little closer, and then a couple of you come across this way.
over here, and then a couple of them on that way. So maybe something like that.
Go ahead and come up closer.
Yeah, it's a gender.
So that we're looking kind of in between. Yeah.
What's going on here? Anybody? Actually, we're almost a little too close to be able to see the imagery.
Focal point seems to be this large, lumpy red bird.
Okay. So you're drawing our attention to this large in the center, which you've identified as a red bird, and you pointed out that it's lumpy.
Yeah.
What did you see that made you say that?
It's kind of curves in the back, and then even like the wing is real. It's not real linear like we'd see most birds.
Okay, so you're looking closely at the sort of perimeter, the outline of this that appears to be very bumpy, and then you pointed out that even what you're identifying as a wing doesn't have the sleek, straight lines that you might expect, but is kind of, again, bumpy and curved a little more.
Yeah, I was just gonna say there's no like definitive, like lines or as far as like the images that everything's kind of like blended together, a lot of colors mixing together, and it's kind of gives you like a little bit fuzzy appearance of like the birds and stuff.
Okay, so you're looking overall at the image and seeing that there aren't a lot of sort of true or pure colors.
Yeah.
There's a lot of color mixing and colors blending into each other. And I think what I heard you saying is that sense of almost blurriness or fuzziness is almost a characteristic of birds. Is that what you were saying? Yeah. Okay, one more.
I see that big bird is going to eat that baby bird, and all of the other birds are trying to attack him.
Okay, so you're sort of discerning some drama or some kind of meaningful relationships here, and suggesting that this might be a baby bird. What did you see that made you say it's an infant? It's not a mature bird.
I don't see feathers like I see on the other ones.
Okay.
Like, even though we don't have like specific lines, that one looks smooth, and the other birds you can kind of see more texture.
Okay, so looking around at some other forms that you identify as birds and seeing that they have kind of a roughness or a complexity in their contours, whereas here you see something that looks more like it has a smooth surface, almost like a naked kind of effect of this bird, which you associate with an immature bird. And then furthermore, you suggested that this large form here is about to eat that. What did you see that made you say there was
Well, for some reason they have expressions in their faces. So this big one looks angry, like he was about to do something. The little one looks scared, and the way the legs are, like he's about to grab here. This one's he's about to grab something.
Okay, so...
And then the other ones are attacking him.
All right, so you're looking at what appears to be an emotion in the face, and especially the eye of this figure, and feeling that it looks perhaps angry, hostile, and similarly reading an expression of fright on that one. And then you drew our attention to these lines down here, which you said look like the foot of this bird. The talon might be about ready to grab that other.
And I believe he did already. As you can see this here. Taken from here.
Okay, so looking closely at the colors that are scattered here, and somebody else pointed out how chaotic sometimes the colors are. It looks to you like this talon, this foot, might have already made a strike at this branch and caused some things to fly off that we're seeing here. So you feel like an attack is in process. And then furthermore, you noted that these other shapes up here that you see as other birds appear to be sort of counterattacking, attacking this large figure. And can I just ask, what do you see in any of these forms that make you feel that they are attacking?
Their face expression and also the angle.
Okay. All right.
They're aiming straight down,
Okay. So
especially at those two.
again, looking at the expression, especially the eyes and the face, and you're pointing out the angle of these as forms seem to go straight towards this, and you said especially these two. What more?
I keep focusing in on the figures in the upper right-hand corner since they're pretty distinctly not birds like the rest of the painting. They don't really fit the bird thing.
So you're looking up in this area,
Yeah.
and saying those forms don't appear like birds to you,
Right.
And can I ask, what do you see that make you say they are some kind of creature, or are you not saying that?
No, I think so. It looks like all three have eyes, and the lowermost looks like it has a nose and almost horns like a cow would. And the other two, well, what I see is figures. Yeah, there and there. This looks like an eye, and this looks like an eye. Ear, mouth, nose.
Okay, so you're identifying some sort of anatomical facial features here that make this seem like a group of creatures of some sort, but you referenced several animal types. You said even a horn-like shape, like a cow, but very unclear what those forms might be. What more?
Seems like to be a transition of colors from like the left to right side, as far as more dark colors to on the right, kind of more of like a lighter shades. I don't know necessarily what that represents, but
Okay, but just noticing again, bringing our attention back to the way color is used, and then also to just kind of the large formal qualities of this, that there seems to be a massing of darker hues on this side, and some kind of a transition towards lighter, and you're actually, it seems, posing the question: is there significance to that or not? You're not sure.
yeah.
Does that have meaning?
I don't know, even kind of just the same thing from like the colors. It seems like things are a little bit more defined on the left, almost. Then when you get here, everything's kind of just lose like the brush strokes are a little more erratic, like right here, and then right here you can't really tell any forms.
Okay.
But there you can kind of, it looks like you can make out
Okay.
some sort of shape.
So there's another sense of transition. We talked about from darker colors to lighter, but you're feeling like there is a sense of greater definition of the forms on the left that becomes more ambiguous or less clear on this side, and you especially drew attention to how sort of bold but also undefined the brushstrokes are over there, as opposed to, for example, these outlines. Am I understanding? What more?
I think overall, just the way that it was painted, like Zach mentioned, that there's not a lot of sharp, edges. It's just kind of all blurred together somewhat. And so then you kind of see some different the different birds and these creatures up here, and then the upper right-hand corner that you're not sure exactly what they are. And I think that just adds a certain level of tension, and kind of like you just kind of feel that there's something going on here. And these, some of the birds, they look like some exotic birds, maybe not, native to the U.S., maybe in other, other parts of the world. And you have some creatures here, and some of those look like, like birds you might see, like a parrot or a toucan or something similar. And these are animals that you're like, it's almost like a mythical kind of animal, and so that kind of adds that element.
Okay. So if I'm understanding you correctly, you're pointing out another sort of gradation here, or sort of continuum from creatures that seem more concrete and recognizable, including some that seem like they might be specific birds from different parts of the world, perhaps not our area, but some others. You mentioned a toucan or other birds like that. And the transition of that to some life forms that we can't quite identify at all. And you mentioned the possibility that they might be mythic, that they might not even be in the natural world. And can I just ask, what did you see that made you say they might not be part of the world as we usually know it?
Right. So, like this one, looks like it has some horns or some other distinguishing features, so that could be, even like a cow or something similar. But like this one, you can kind of, I don't know, it looks like an eye just like the other ones have, but it's a little bit harder to like make out a distinct form or to like compare it to something, a mental image that you already have in your mind. And then this one as well. And it's tough because you can only see the head as well. You can't see the rest of the body. So, yeah, that's...
Okay, so some of them are just plain perplexing and vague, and others, it seems like you're saying, suggest but don't really define some possibilities, like the cow idea and the horn idea. And then you mentioned early on in this comment that you thought those differences between recognizable or more defined versus not recognizable and undefined, that creates a kind of tension here.
Right, yeah.
What did you see that made you say that's uncomfortable?
Just kind of like how humans, how we're comfortable with things that we understand, that we know, and then when we go to, we encounter new things or different things in our life that we don't understand, it creates a certain level of tension and maybe stress or, whatever you want to see in that. But, so that's just kind of what I was noticing there, is that, there are some differences and some contrasts and maybe some things that you're not familiar with.
Okay. So if I'm understanding you correctly, it feels kind of like real experience, that in life there are some things you're unfamiliar with, some things you recognize and are familiar with, and there's always a certain sense of discomfort maybe when we don't fully understand what we're encountering.
Absolutely, yep.
Does anybody have any last comments on this one? Well, maybe we could just shift focus for a minute, and I would just like to know what you noticed about this discussion, how it went, what I did, what you did, how it functioned.
I noticed that everyone seemed to notice completely different things about the paintings than I did. Like, I mean, it's very in the eye of the beholder, I think.
So that was kind of a notable thing about this, hearing people pick up on things that hadn't really occurred to you.
Yeah, I felt like I got a better understanding whenever one person would point out something, then you'd look at it their way and they're like, oh, well, I didn't see it that way. And then you decide, well, I like the way I saw that, or try to change your mind and say, well, maybe it means this, or
Right.
also what is that?
So you had a chance to consider, does that change the way I see it or not?
I think to kind of go along with what's been said, we looked at two different paintings, kind of different setups and different look to it, and like Casey said, people notice different things, and I think that just kind of resembles in life how there's a lot of different people in the world and a lot of different viewpoints, and people see things differently, and it's good to be open, like Robert said, to other people's ideas and to see things and try to understand the way that people see it. I think if we're all the same, it'd be a pretty boring world. So it's a good thing that there's a lot of diversity.
Yeah, no kidding. And I'm telling you, as a person who's done discussions like this in the gallery with a lot of people, sometimes I'll show the same work of art 100 times and I'll still hear somebody say something that nobody else has said before. I mean, it's really kind of wonderful. Totally agree with you. Yeah. So, It sounds like you, especially towards the end, started making some sort of connections between this experience of looking at a work of art and finding meaning there with larger experiences in the world. I'm just interested, did anybody find any connections between what we were doing here with your work as veterinarians?
Obviously, I mean, the first thing we related it to was animals, you know. We were trying to, like, depict maybe what species it was, or, like, where these birds came from, like, what part of the world. So, you know, I think it's more of, like, you know, and, you know, too, like, you know, sometimes when you think of, like, people in the sciences, it's very, like, you know, black and white kind of thing, you know, formulations and stuff. And so, you know, compared from that picture where it was very detailed lines and very kind of more structured to something over here where it was more, you know, on the creative, you know, kind of just more in the open kind of thing up to your
I mean, it seemed like in the other painting, people quickly identified what specific things were, but there was a sense of perplexity or ambiguity really about why they were there together. Whereas here, it was not even that easy to identify what you were seeing at all. Did anybody find it annoying or aggravating when I would ask you, and you might have noticed that sometimes you said something that seemed pretty self-evident, and I would say, what did you see that made you say that?
Yeah, I thought that was really annoying. Cause I thought, well, it's a bobber. That's why I thought bobber. It looks like a bobber. So,
I don't think it was annoying. I think it's good that you did that because I may see something that it's obvious to me, but maybe it's not obvious to the other person.
And that's absolutely the reason we do it. And again, back to your point about diversity, the more diverse the group of viewers, the more different their life experience has been, the more likely it is that that'll happen, that something that seems absolutely self-evident to some people really isn't to somebody else. And so if we want to create a good communication and a good, safe group discussion space, it's really important for people to lay that stuff out. And there's another reason for it too, and that is that sometimes we know why we think things are what they are, but we haven't really thought about we haven't broken down the visual process of knowing that. I mean, I'm sure it was really annoying when you said that was a bobber, and I asked you, what did you see that made you say that, and you described the shape and the colors. But that mental habit of knowing how I know what I know, does that have any application when you're doing work in the clinic?
That's with clients.
Yeah.
We have to be able to explain things that, to us it's obvious if you look at something, anatomy, like we were talking about. If you look at an animal, you know anatomically what you're talking about. Well, your clients, odds are, don't have nearly the amount of anatomical knowledge that you do. So you have to be able to explain yourself, which I am horrible at. I'm really bad at it. So it's a struggle for me.
No, it's a struggle for anyone who has expertise. It's almost like the more expertise you have and the deeper your understanding, the greater the gulf between you and people who haven't had that experience. And so that ability, whether you're a doctor or a veterinarian or some other intense expert, I think it's really important to give that some thought on how to foresee those gaps. Because I think when people don't understand what you're saying, it's not because you intended so. It's not a deliberate thing, but being more aware of it. Well, I really enjoyed this discussion, and it's part of something I was talking with your dean about, how there are a lot of partnerships around the country between medical schools and art museums. And people are doing things like this because this kind of activity has a pretty proven track record to help people develop, greater ability to notice detail, ability to communicate, and an ability to back off from quick judgments and really consider something from several sides, so that kind of critical thinking piece. And so, for example, at Harvard, every first-year medical student goes through a series of discussions like this at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. And so when I arrived here and started talking with your dean, we thought it would be really interesting, because I don't know of anybody else who's doing it with a vet med program. And so thank you for helping us have this initial experiment. And I would just love it if you were willing to jot a few thoughts and email them about this, because it will help us think about whether some kind of activity like this might be useful to students in your college. I know you're all really busy, so it's not so easy to fit in something like this.
It's not bad.
So thank you very much. And thanks for allowing us to take photographs and videotape you. We're making an anniversary video about the museum, and we thought it would be so exciting to have at least a few seconds of showing students in the galleries, and the fact that you wore your stethoscopes. Really, it screams science and art, and we really love that idea. So thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.